Welcome to the debate. If you are a non-native English speaker preparing for a job interview, I want to start by dispelling a massive myth right off the bat.
Oh, please do.
Your accent it is almost never the reason you don't get the job.
Yeah, that is entirely true. Hiring managers speak with brilliant professionals from all over the world every single day.
Exactly. What actually loses you the job is what happens when your brain tries to translate complex professional experiences in real time. You're under stress and, well, you just start to ramble.
Right. So today we're diving into the most effective strategies for non-native English speakers to prepare for and, ultimately succeed in English language job interviews.
And the core disagreement we are exploring today really comes down to how you solve that problem of rambling under pressure. Yes, exactly. Does interview success primarily come from mastering rigorous, highly structured storytelling frameworks to prove your competency?
Or does it come from simplifying your language, adjusting your pacing, and focusing purely on conversational alignment?
I argue that structured frameworks like the past, current, why, here model and the STAR method are the ultimate equalizers. They bypass language barriers entirely by giving your brain an automated track to run on.
And I take the position that overstructuring is exactly what leads to those brittle, unnatural answers, the kind that just fall apart the second an interviewer interrupts you. Candidates actually succeed through simplified phrasing, very deliberate pacing, and building interpersonal alignment in the room.
I think to really understand why structure is so vital, we need to look under the hood at the fundamental challenge non-native speakers face. We touched on it a second ago, the rambling.
Yeah.
But why does that happen? It's a phenomenon known as translation lag.
Right, that moment of hesitation.
Yes, but it's really more than just hesitation. It's a massive cognitive load.
Oh, absolutely.
When you are sitting across from a hiring manager, translating thoughts at interview speed, your prefrontal cortex is working overtime.
It's exhausting.
It is. You're formulating a complex professional thought in your native language, then searching your mental database for the English equivalent, checking the grammar, and rendering it aloud, all while monitoring the interviewer's facial expressions.
It's a lot to juggle.
It's too much to juggle. Without a strict internal skeleton for your answer, that lag causes your thoughts to sprawl. You panic to fill the silence,
Mm-hmm.
You might wander into irrelevant childhood background or over-explain the daily tasks of a past job, or just awkwardly trail off at the end of a long sentence because you lost your train of thought. Applying strict frameworks acts as a safety net against that sprawl.
Well, I see the logic there, but I come at it from a completely different angle. The standard advice in interview prep is to use these complex frameworks, but I think that forces non-native speakers into a very dangerous trap.
How so?
Well, what ends up happening? Candidates write out long, complicated paragraphs that fit perfectly into these frameworks, and then they try to memorize them word for word.
Well, memorization is definitely a mistake. I totally agree with that.
Incredibly brittle answer.
Brittle?
Yeah, brittle. If you are relying on a rigid internal skeleton, what happens when the interviewer interrupts you to ask a quick clarifying question?
The
candidate's concentration shatters. The adrenaline spikes, they lose their place in the framework, and they completely freeze.
Interruptions happen.
Exactly. They happen all the time. That's why I argue the success hinges much more on mastering the physical mechanics of delivery rather than the architecture of the story. Specifically, slowing down your speaking rate by about 20% to a deliberate pace of 130 to 140 words per minute.
I want to push back on that, but first, explain the math there. Why that specific speed?
Because conversational English between native speakers usually hums along at about 150 to 160 words per minute.
Okay.
If you try to match that speed while translating in your head, you trip over your own vocabulary. But just as importantly, if you have an accent, the native speaker's brain needs a fraction of a second longer to process unfamiliar vowel sounds or syllable stresses.
That makes sense.
Right. So by deliberately dialing your speed back to 130 or 140 words per minute, you hit this perfect auditory sweet spot. You sound thoughtful rather than slow, and the interviewer never experiences listening fatigue.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you pair that deliberate pace with short, simple sentences and treat the interview as a flexible human interaction rather than a rigid presentation, you build the rapport necessary to win the job.
I see why you emphasize the mechanics, but let me give you a different perspective. Let's apply this to the very first question of almost every interview. Tell me about yourself.
The classic opener.
The classic opener. Now, introductions seem easy because you know they're coming, but this question is deceptively open-ended.
Very true.
Without a framework, it's a disaster waiting to happen. You don't know where to begin or where to end. This is why the past, current, why framework, the PCW model, is so absolutely vital.
Walk us through how that actually works in practice.
Sure. The PCW model tells the candidate exactly what to say and, crucially, what to leave out.
Right.
The past segment selects only the credential that establishes immediate relevance to the job. You aren't summarizing your entire resume.
Nobody wants to hear your whole life story.
Exactly. Let me give you a concrete example from the standard material of a candidate using this structure perfectly.
Okay.
They say, I have a master's in computer science from the University of Illinois. And then, before that, I worked 2 years at Infosys in Pune on ETL pipelines.
Let's pause right there and really look at that example. That is a fantastic sentence for a native speaker. But for an English learner, that is a very long, complex thought with a lot of heavy, specific terminology stacked together.
But notice how specific it is. Even if the listener doesn't know what an ETL pipeline is, the hiring manager for that technical role absolutely does. That terminology proves competency.
Sure, the hiring manager knows it. But my point is about the candidate's cognitive load. Stacking Masters in Computer Science, University of Illinois, Infosys in Pune, and ETL pipelines into one continuous breath is an invitation to stumble.
I'd argue that the structure itself is what carries them through. Think of structure not just as architectural scaffolding, but like putting your brain on autopilot.
Autopilot?
Yeah. When you use the PCW framework, you don't have to spend any mental energy deciding what to say next. That frees up 100% of your cognitive processing power to focus entirely on pronouncing those terms correctly.
I don't know about that.
Well, notice what that candidate did not do in that example. They did not apologize for their English. They did not nervously explain their visa status. They simply anchored their highest credential immediately. They used a clean framework to prove they belong in the room from second one.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it acts as autopilot. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
If a candidate is nervous and they stumble on the phrase ETL pipelines while desperately trying to remember the next part of their past, current, why here structure, they don't sound authoritative. They sound like a robot giving a broken sales pitch.
A broken sales pitch? That's a bit harsh.
It's what it sounds like. I advocate for much simpler, shorter sentences. You absolutely do not need complex grammar to show your professional value. Listen to this alternative example.
All right, let's hear it.
My name is Sarah. I am from Mexico. I have 2 years of experience in sales. I like working in teams.
I mean, I hear that, but we have to be realistic about the competitive landscape. Does that really convey enough professional weight for, say, a senior project management role? It sounds a bit, well, elementary.
It conveys absolute clarity and confidence, which is far more important than complex syntax. The hiring manager already read your resume, right? They know your credentials.
True.
What they are testing in the room is your communication. And more importantly, the Sarah example allows for micro pauses.
What do you mean by micro pauses?
When you use short sentences, you get a physical moment to breathe at every period. You also give the interviewer's brain a moment to process the information.
Okay, I see that.
Instead of trying to link your past and your present with a long, grammatically complex compound clause, which is where non-native speakers usually make preposition errors, by the way, you can just use a simple bridging sentence.
Like what?
You state your past, and then you just say, that is the background. And then you take a physical breath and you move to the present. You don't need a fancy transition. It's vastly safer. It manages your oxygen levels, and it sounds remarkably natural.
That's an interesting point about managing oxygen and pacing, though I would frame the necessity of structure differently.
How so?
I agree that short, bridging sentences like, "that is the background," are incredibly useful, but they still need to connect structural pillars. Let's move to the real core of the interview, the behavioral questions.
The classic, tell me about a time you failed type of questions.
Exactly. I see how your simple pacing gets you through the introduction, but introductions are relatively easy because they are predictable.
Sure.
The real test of translation lag happens when they hit you with a behavioral question, like, "tell me about a time you faced a challenge." They are looking for specific, undeniable evidence of your competency. Here, I completely champion the STAR method. Situation, task, action, result.
Which is heavily pushed in almost all corporate interview prep.
Because it works. Without the STAR method, a candidate who is struggling to translate might just say, "I am a very hard worker when things get busy."
Yeah, which isn't great.
It's a claim, not proof. But with STAR, they provide a tangible narrative. Consider this specific example from the material. In my last job at a coffee shop, I had to prepare for a busy morning rush.
Setting the scene.
Exactly. Then they say, "I divided tasks with my coworkers, and we served 50 more customers without delays."
It's a nice, tidy story on paper.
It is deeply effective because it walks the listener's brain through a logical progression. The situation and task, the coffee shop and the morning rush set the scene quickly.
Right.
The action shows what the candidate actually did, which is dividing tasks, and the result provides a hard, tangible metric, serving 50 more customers. If you have that framework in your head, it actively prevents those vague, wandering answers where a candidate talks for 3 minutes without actually answering the prompt.
That is a compelling argument for native speakers. But have you considered the sheer mental juggling required to execute the STAR method in a second language under interview conditions?
I think preparation solves that.
I disagree. You are asking the candidate to remember the 4 distinct steps of STAR, retrieve their memories, translate those memories into English, select the right professional vocabulary, and monitor their grammar, all while a hiring manager is staring at them, waiting.
It's challenging, yes.
Trying to remember the rigid steps of STAR is exactly what causes candidates to hit a wall and completely freeze.
So if we throw out the structure, how do they answer a complex behavioral question? Do they just improvise?
They answer by focusing on honest, simple formulations rather than building a multi-act play. This is especially vital for the really tricky behavioral questions, like when they ask about your weaknesses.
Oh, the weakness question is always tough.
Exactly. If you use a highly structured, overly rehearsed STAR answer for a weakness question, it often sounds incredibly fake. The focus shouldn't be on narrative architecture. It should just be on showing a positive step forward in the simplest terms possible.
Give me an example of what that sounds like.
A candidate could simply say, "Sometimes I speak too fast, but I'm learning to slow down." Or, "I don't have much experience with Excel, but I'm practicing every day."
I mean, I agree those show positive steps, but they are incredibly brief. Is an interviewer going to be satisfied with a one-sentence answer to a behavioral question?
They are brief, honest, and smart. They show immense self-awareness without requiring the candidate to build a complex multi-part narrative that they might get lost inside of.
I guess that's true.
You don't need a task and a result to show you are self-aware.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're assuming that structure inherently causes a candidate to freeze. I actually argue the exact opposite.
Really?
Yes. Understanding structure gives you specific mechanical tricks to sound significantly more fluent and authoritative, even when your vocabulary is limited.
What kind of tricks?
Let's look at how candidates deliver data and metrics. When non-native speakers talk about their achievements, they often bury their numbers at the very end of a long, explanatory sentence.
Right, building up to it.
Yeah, but to sound fluent and command the room, there's a structural trick. You should anchor the numbers before giving them context.
How does that look in practice?
Instead of making the listener wait for the impact, you flip the sentence structure entirely. You say, "We cut transaction processing time by 30% in 6 months." See? You lead with the impact noun. You do not talk about the long, difficult journey of the software project first. Structuring your sentence to highlight the metric first shows high-level executive communication skills. In English syntax, leading with the metric hits the listener's ear with immediate authority, regardless of your native language or your accent.
I absolutely understand the logic of leading with the metric. Executive communication loves bottom line up front. But let's talk about the biological reality of nerves and mistakes.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Both of our methods, whether it's your STAR method or my pacing techniques, carry the risk that the candidate will just get lost. Adrenaline is a very powerful chemical.
It is.
If a candidate blanks out because of adrenaline, having perfect sentence structure, like anchoring your numbers, isn't going to save them. If their brain simply drops the English word for transaction, that entire perfectly structured sentence falls apart, and the silence becomes deafening.
That's a fair point. Adrenaline happens to everyone. So how do you propose they recover when that inevitably happens?
By using a highly specific blank out recovery phrase.
The recovery phrase?
Yes. When you lose your place mid-answer, the instinct is to panic or to speak faster or to apologize profusely for your English. You have to fight that instinct. Instead, you pause, you take a visible breath, and you say, "Let me make sure I'm being clear."
Oh, wow. I really like that.
It's a lifesaver. You say that phrase, "Let me make sure I'm being clear," and then you just continue from the last thought you can clearly remember. Or you just rephrase the sentence entirely.
Why does that specific phrase work so well, though?
Because of how it reads to the interviewer. It doesn't read as a failure of language. It reads as composed self-correction. It makes it look like you, the candidate, are taking meticulous care to communicate your ideas well to the team.
That's incredibly smart.
It reframes a moment of panic into a moment of thoughtful leadership. And this goes right back to my core point. Interview success is really about interpersonal alignment, not executing a rigid script.
It sounds like we're moving away from the words entirely and talking about the nonverbal aspects of the conversation now.
Exactly. Because communication is holistic. It's about how you connect in the physical space of the room. It's mirroring the interviewer's body language slightly to build subconscious rapport. It's smiling naturally. It's making direct eye contact when you deliver those short, simple sentences. You can demonstrate immense confidence without relying on complex vocabulary at all. And you can carry this interpersonal alignment all the way to the very end of the interview.
You mean when they ask the inevitable, "Do you have any questions for us?"
Yes. You don't need a highly structured, multi-part strategic question to impress them. You use simple language to show genuine engagement. You just ask, "What does a normal day look like in this job?"
That is beautifully simple.
It's polite, it's simple, and it effectively shows you are seriously visualizing yourself in the role, doing the work alongside them.
Despite our different approaches, I think we are naturally arriving at a place where these ideas overlap.
I think so too.
If we step back and look at the whole picture, my perspective remains that frameworks like the past, current, why model and the STAR method are absolutely essential tools. They eliminate the terrible risks of rambling.
Right.
They provide a defense against translation lag by giving the candidate an internal roadmap so they don't have to invent structure on the fly. They allow you to present your professional value clearly and logically.
And my perspective remains that deliberate pacing, specifically training yourself to hit that 130 to 140 words per minute speed, along with short, simple bridging sentences and strong psychological recovery tools, are what actually create a genuine human connection in the room. Overstructuring risks making you sound like a robot reciting a manual, but simplicity makes you sound like a confident, grounded professional.
However, it is very clear we converge on a few absolutely vital points. First, and perhaps most importantly, we both completely agree that word-for-word memorization is a trap that will destroy your interview.
Oh, absolutely. Writing out a full, beautifully grammatically correct script and trying to memorize it is the most dangerous thing a non-native speaker can do. When the adrenaline hits, that script will vanish.
Poof. Gone.
Exactly. Instead, candidates should only prepare their ideas in bullet points.
Yes, bullet points give you the core concepts without locking you into specific vocabulary. And when it comes to practice, how should they rehearse those bullet points? They should practice by speaking to a wall out loud, letting the exact phrasing change slightly every single time.
Right.
They should also record the time to ensure they are staying within that optimal 1 to 2 minute window for their answers.
I would add that they need to do interrupt stress tests.
How does that work?
You sit down with a friend and you start answering a practice question. Have your friend intentionally interrupt you 30 seconds into your answer with a random clarifying question.
Oh, that's brilliant.
If you can practice recovering from that interruption using a tool like the phrase, "Let me make sure I'm being clear," your baseline anxiety going into the real interview will drop significantly. You won't fear the interruption anymore.
That's incredibly practical advice. We also agree on a very crucial psychological point that bears repeating. You should never apologize for your English.
Never.
Saying something like, "My English is not perfect," front-loads a negative. It draws the interviewer's attention to a language barrier they might not have even cared about or noticed. You must lead with your credentials, your metrics, and your value.
Ultimately, listeners do not have to choose just one strict path here. They can look at their own natural communication style. They can structure their thoughts intelligently, knowing what key metrics and stories they want to highlight, while intentionally choosing to deliver those thoughts simply, clearly, and slowly.
Exactly. There is immense value in applying these practical examples to your own preparation. Finding the right balance between robust structure and accessible simplicity is a personal journey for every professional navigating a second language.
It brings to mind an image. Imagine you're walking a tightrope across a deep canyon. The wind is blowing. That's the interview.
And you need the underlying structure, the tension of the rope, to know exactly where you are going. But you also need the flexibility, the breathing room, and the steady pace to actually make it safely to the other side.
Take a breath, find your balance, and take that first step.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate. We leave it to you, the listener, to decide how you will walk your own path.